Hi everyone, and welcome to In at the Side, episode 11. I'm JK, and I've taken over the show this week. I'm joined as always by the usual faces of Dom Hardman and Scenario Neil. This week's guest will be known for this on live TV.
To get ahead of their limitations, I'm struggling with this one. Bath at the moment. Forgive me, we're having an absolute nightmare. Bath perhaps struggling to get together with their... I've had absolutely... I'm sorry, apologies.
We are joined by the Lord of Rugby Broadcasting, Mr. Alex Payne. Alex, how are you doing?
You fuckers. I was doing quite well. I sort of come onto this with a slight sort of, looking forward to a good chinwag, and you stitched me up on minute one. So,
well, you should be used to that.
I was doing pretty well. Watching you fluff your intro, it obviously goes to show that, even average Joe has his day. But I'm delighted to be here in inverted commas.
I'm sure you'll get me back at some point, given that will go on the bloopers reel at some stage in the future. So obviously, isolation happening. How are you getting on with things? What's new with you? How are you doing keeping yourself busy?
That's a very good question. I've got a business, so that's keeping me very, very busy. Not all of it is forward progress, but lots of it is, very time consuming. That's the sort of heavy duty stuff. And then I've got a wife of 12 years, and there's been a fairly hefty to-do list that's been generating for large parts of that. And now that I'm at home most of the time, she's got me painting, creosoting, mending, digging, planting, all those kind of things. So, it's pretty full on at the moment. These are crazy days. I don't know whether you're all experiencing the same thing, but it's a very weird world to be living in right now. I think we're definitely living history, but not necessarily sure it's the kind of history I want to be living. But interesting times for sure.
Yeah, certainly. And I know, obviously, I work from home most days anyway, so I don't get away with not doing stuff, which is a pain in the backside sometimes. Obviously, office life is beckoning, I'm hoping. But no, things are definitely weird. Queuing up at a shop, don't think I've ever done that in my
Very odd.
I'm getting used to running out of bed at 12 noon though most days.
But that's normal time for you, isn't it?
Huh?
It's normal for you, isn't it?
Yeah, Saturday and Sunday maybe, but 7 days a week is great at the moment.
You've obviously not got kids, or maybe you do, and they're able to sort of entertain themselves. Mine are up at 6 most mornings, so the days at 12 o'clock line were glorious.
4:30 this morning for me.
Oh, yeah, light.
6-month-old decided he didn't want to sleep through for the first time in a few weeks, so that was an interesting time.
Yeah, I'd love to offer you sympathy, JK, but I've been there and I've done it, and there's very little coming from me to you, I can tell you.
Oh, this is my 4th time, so I'm a glutton for punishment.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's on here?
All little boys, all boys as well.
And I'm the opposite. I've got 3 daughters, all girls.
Lovely, nice little sevens team there.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not letting these boys near my girls. No way.
Oi! Whoa, my boys are absolute diamonds.
I know their dad.
So, obviously, one of the biggest names in rugby broadcasting. Just to get an idea of how that all came about, how did you start off with everything like that?
That's a very good question. How did I start? So I was always a sports nut. Played lots. I was a sort of dedicated. I was keen, enthusiastic, but limited with ability. But a huge sort of
like Dom.
Apparently so. But I was a sort of regular Saturday afternoon. I used to get up in the middle of the night if there was a game to watch. I'm not sure I should admit this publicly, but I probably had 200 or 300 games recorded on VHS back in the day when that was a thing. Devoted Sunday afternoon rugby special watcher, the days of Chris Rear and John Inverdale. So I was very, very passionate about the sport, and I curiously decided to do history of art at Edinburgh University, which doesn't segue that naturally into sports broadcasting, but I knew I wanted to work in sport. I actually, funny enough, originally wanted to be a sculptor. There's a little left field curveball for you, but was never going to be the next sort of Henry Moore or anything like that. So realised that a proper sort of job would be in sport. Went to work for various agencies. I did some work experience at Bath Rugby Club, but wrote to Sky back in the day when they had the whole lot, and was lucky enough to get picked up for a little bit of work experience. So I went to 2 weeks work experience there. Just literally doing everything from making cups of tea to logging videos and highlights and that kind of thing. And one of the benefits of doing work experience at Sky in those days is that we, back in 2000, whatever it was, 2001, they had the Six Nations games at Twickenham. So I ended up at Twickenham on England-France game day and just was like, this is it. This is the bug. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was 21. I was halfway through university, but so I did a 2 weeks work experience. I said that I've got nothing else to do. I'm happy to stay on. So I did an extra month with them in my holidays. And at the end of the sort of, whatever it was, 5-6 weeks I did with them, I said, look, if I'm in Australia for the Lions tour in 2001, can I work for you guys? And they said, yeah, brilliant. We'd love to have you out there. That'd be great. You've got to get yourself out there, look after yourself, but we'll employ you on game day. So I had 3 guys who I was playing rugby with up in Edinburgh. We hired a horse, I can't remember, an old banger, and followed the tour up and down the East Coast in this old banger. And on game day, I found myself working for Sky on the Lions tour, and
Wow.
the real fire was lit. I don't know how far back your memory goes, but the Gabba 2001, the first test. I was meant to be in a porter cabin, pressing buttons, logging tackles and turnovers and that kind of thing for the stats. And none of the kit arrived because it all got stuck in customs. And 15 minutes before kickoff, there was nothing for me to do. I'd made my last cup of tea. Everyone was sort of getting into game mode. And a very kind sort of fixer said, look, there's nothing for you to do. Here's a pitch side pass. Go enjoy yourself. No. And I was 21 years old, walking around the outside of the Gabba 10 minutes before Australia Lions kicked off. And I don't know if you remember that day, but it was the day that the Lions fans dominated Australia. It was absolutely extraordinary. And I ended up sitting at the end of the Lions bench on a spare seat next to the likes of Dawson and I think who else was on the bench that day. Healy, I think, was on there. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. This is like every dream come true kind of thing. And that was the point I realised that sports broadcasting was the one I wanted to go for. And then it was just a case of working, pedaling your way, being in the right place at the right time. A huge amount of luck. But I think if you work hard and you're in the right place, then you get lucky. So that was where it all began. And a lot of people would tell you I should probably still be making the tea and the coffee, and I don't think that. But they were magical days.
Yeah, I can imagine. And obviously, so is that the route that you, obviously, if you were to advise any budding broadcasters who would look to get into a similar role, is look at getting that work experience in, offer yourself as much as possible, and work your absolute arse off basically, and see where it gets you.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much nailed it. It is hard work. I think almost the most important bit is that you've got to have a real passion for whatever it is that you want to broadcast. I would never have made it in music or film necessarily. I love both, but I've just not got the depth of knowledge that I do for sport, and that passion point that gets you up at 2 a.m. because that's when there's an interesting game to watch. Haven't necessarily got that anymore, but you have to absolutely be prepared to commit yourself to it. And I love sport in general, but I was particularly passionate about rugby, and that worked for me because you end up making a huge amount of sacrifices to pursue that dream. I mean, I started at a week after I left university. I started as a runner at Sky, and that is taking scripts around to various studios. It's collecting sandwiches. It's making tea and coffee. And you're doing that at some pretty antisocial hours. That is, late nights on tennis overnight shifts. It's almost every single weekend. And as a result of that, you miss out on your big Friday nights, and you miss out on your friends getting married, and you miss out on, 25th birthdays. But for me, it was an absolute no-brainer. I was never really that worried about it. And that I think is the key to it. You have to be absolutely passionate. And in order to get to the point that you then start talking to a big audience about the things that you love, it is the hard work. It's networking. I think manners are absolutely essential. I think it's extraordinary how often, and I can think of 5, 6, 7 people off the top of my head, people who sat on me pretty hard when I was a runner. It happened very, very quickly for me. I was very, very lucky, and with hindsight, it probably happened too quickly. But I went from T-boy to reporting on the 2005 Lions tour in about 9 months, and that is with no training, no experience, anything. But there were various people who were pretty hard on me as a runner, who within a year were suddenly bringing me the tea, which is a very odd thing to get your head around.
I bet you had a big grin on your face when that happened.
Well, no, because you don't want to be that guy. But I think that the advice that you hand out is that you need to be polite and courteous and respectful of everybody, because you never know when they'll be above you or you'll necessarily be above them. So,
no, exactly.
And that kind of work hard and be passionate.
Yeah, and that kind of, I think that plays into most work ethics, even just outside of broadcast and rugby. It's all about making sure that you find something that you're really good at and absolutely nailing it as much as you can. Obviously, 9 months, Jesus Christ, being thrown in from T-boy to presenting, been absolutely bricking it on that day.
Do you know, it's funny, I don't often look back, but I look back now and I can remember doing my first live cross from a touchline. It was Bay of Plenty against the Lions in the 05 Lions tour. And I would not be lying to you to say that I didn't sleep for 2 or 3 nights before. And we're talking about a minute and a half cross. And I just, I was so out of my depth. It was frightening. And now you move from being terrified by the scenario. And funny, Jim, the other bit of advice I would give, and I don't mean it to come across as flippant, but fundamentally, none of it really matters. And what I mean by that is, I've had some, as you have very kindly alluded to already, I've had some monumental fuck-ups on air. And the truth of it is that, you go home, you're talking about sport. The sun comes up. I hope my wife still loves me. My kids will say goodnight. And if anything, what we're living through at the moment is, is symptomatic of the fact that there are some far more serious issues out there that actually do need attention. And actually, we spend a lot of our lives worrying about things that, who cares? What's the worst that could happen? I'll go and find another job. I mean, I have lived a dream. I've blagged my way through it. None of it really matters. That's the truth of it. And when you take that pressure off, it's amazing how much you begin to enjoy it. I used to hate reporting. Now I just love the ability to tell big stories, big game days to big audiences.
Yeah, and I think obviously current times is kind of showing, and I think we've spoken to a lot of the Premiership rugby players now who are saying the same thing. And I think Sonati yesterday nailed it on the head when he said, "I'm about rugby at the moment. There's bigger things, and I'm obviously spending the time with my family." And that, especially from sports people, even from the amateur game, obviously my wife, I can't believe she's still with me. I talk about rugby, do rugby, play rugby. It's a big part of my life. And now I'm at home without it. It kind of brings it back into saying, well, rugby's not the be all and end all at the end of the day. Times that I'm spending now is the important thing.
Your wife is a wise lady. I mean, my wife has been a...
Don't let her hear you say that, please.
Okay. I wouldn't use the word. You wouldn't use the expression rugby widow, but she has been, she's been pretty subjected to the day job for 15 years. My wife could not be less interested in sport. I mean, if I go away on tour, she asks where I'm off to as I leave with the bag, kind of thing. It doesn't register. It's not interesting to her, and in many ways, I love her all the more for it, because the last thing I want to do when I come home, having been talking about the breakdown all day, is have a wife who asks me about the breakdown. This is just like not interested.
It's one of those. Good luck, have fun, and don't fuck up.
Yeah. And when you do, I'll be here to tell you that you have fucked up. It's funny you played that clip from Adams Park. Actually, I remember walking in through the door the day after that, or the night that happened. I got home from the game, and I said I was looking rather shell shocked, and my wife was actually here with my sister, and I said I've had an absolute shocker. And she was like, "What do you mean? You've said this before. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine." I said, "No, I've had an absolute shocker." And I Sky Plussed it, and I played it back, and she went, "Yeah, you've had an absolute shocker." So at least there was no bullshit. There was no running from it. But
that's what you need in a partner, though, isn't it? Someone who's brutally honest, and you can rely on that. Because at the end of the day, it's you don't want someone who's just going to say, "Oh no, I'm sure it's fine."
You know it. Yeah, home truths are the best for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. So obviously talked a lot about the current situation, the pandemic, and so. What's your opinion? Obviously, they've finished the majority of the leagues. Obviously, Premiership Rugby is still seemingly adamant they're going to finish the season. What do you think, or what's your opinion on that? Is that the right thing to do, or do you think we should just scrap it and start again? next season.
What's your opinion?
I mean, I'm a Bath fan, so I'm quite happy to just call it quits and we'll see you next season.
I think they should be carrying on so they can push up.
Control Alt Delete. I mean, I don't know. I would hate to be a suit at the moment. I think, they're worrying about trying to finish seasons and they're trying to put plans in place. But there's absolutely no. I mean, I'd be amazed if they finish this season. I think they just have to control. Keep saying the expression control Alt Delete the whole thing. Funny enough, I think the rugby landscape that we come back to will be very, very different to the one that we've left. I cannot see a way in which the sort of status quo that we were all used to is what we get back to. I think there will be clubs that don't make it through to the other side. I mean, hypothetically speaking, we're talking about 18 months of interruption here, and I think we'll be let out to play for a couple of months, and then the numbers will go up, and they'll say, right, everybody back inside for a month. I mean, fundamentally, how do you get players fit for that? How do you give players 2 months on, 1 month off, or whatever it's going to be? I'm not sure you'll be able to get crowds back in the scale that we would be used to. Again, they're not talking about letting crowds back into sporting fixtures until there's a vaccine. Well, that's 18 months away. I genuinely, I'm terrified for the status quo. But the sort of the gambler in me thinks that rugby has to take this opportunity to get its house fully in order. I mean, we are 25 years into professionalism, and I think long before COVID-19 arrived, there were some massive issues in the game. Financially, huge problems. And I just think that this is the sort of start again point. I'm sure you can finish the season if we can find out a way of doing it. I don't know whether it's the equivalent of the Duckworth-Lewis method. I quite like the idea of a sort of a fives tournament or a spoof tournament or a rugby, whatever it is, rugby 20 tournament, whereby, I mean, imagine if you could get your fans dialing in to watch Maro Itoje. Well, actually, he's got a lot to play for now, Maro, but you had, Jack Noel playing against, Cobus Reinach at Northampton, and it was literally a game of spoof or a game of rock, paper, scissors to see who goes through to the semi-finals. I mean, that'd be unbelievable. Yeah, it'd be good to tell you that. I think the honest answer is who knows what we're going to end up with. I would be amazed if they finish this season, and I'd be very sad if this is not the point at which rugby says, right, let's root and branch, start again, make sure we get it right across the board.
Yeah, and England Rugby mentioned they were going to have a loss season in terms of finances. Obviously, with COVID-19, obviously that's going to be a hell of a lot more. Is this going to impact the championship more and downwards into grassroots rugby, you think?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We're actually doing a sort of podcast, House of Rugby podcast tomorrow. We've got these little short sessions that we do. We're talking to a president of a grassroots rugby club. I mean, inevitably it's going to have a huge impact. I've got a sort of a sympathy for the RFU. I think they do some very, very good work, and I think they give out a phenomenal amount of money. I mean, people forget they're a not-for-profit organisation, and they are there to fund grassroots rugby. Now, it's not easy, particularly in a World Cup year when they lose all their autumn international revenue. They've got some big challenges as an organisation. But yeah, I mean, it is inevitable. It's wherever you look at the moment, people have got challenges. So I think. I think the grassroots game is inevitably going to be suffering. I mean, it's the problem with rugby at the moment is there just isn't a huge amount of money going around. There are some very talented players at the very top of the tree who are doing pretty well for themselves, but elsewhere, even in the Premiership, there are that middle tranche of player, has suffered hugely. We had did a show the other day with Luther Burrell, who's obviously now at Warrington Wolves. That middle tier of player, the guys who want to be on big money because they are club statesmen and they've played a few internationals, they're just not getting value now from they're not getting pickup, they're not getting interest because so much money goes on the superstars. And if you are a middle tier man, well, it's too expensive to pay you, and therefore we'll just go with an academy kid who might not have quite the same ability but costs us a fraction of the price. So it's just sort of symptomatic at the moment. The game just hasn't got a lot of money in it, and I do worry for grassroots clubs, and I do worry for what that long-term implication is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to have a lot of restructures, isn't it?
Yeah.
We were speaking. Sorry, Jack. We were speaking to Lewis the other day, and he was mentioning the finances at Gloucester, what they're having to do, they've been asked to do, wage cuts and that sort of thing. From your knowledge, is that completely across the Premiership? Is every club sort of bringing that into effect? Do you think, or is it just?
Yeah. I mean, Sarries have announced literally just before we started recording this that they've furloughed their players. They're deferring payments.
Worcester already done it.
Worcester. I mean, Sale I think have been quite quick to act on as well, and then Northampton have had to sort of change payment terms, etc. It's again, I just go back to that. It's not just rugby. I mean, we can shine the microscope on it. It is just unsustainable for a sport and a business that is losing millions and millions and millions of pounds a year to continue to pay really highly paid athletes when there isn't anything to pay them for. There's no revenue coming in from tickets. There's no revenue coming in from broadcasters.
And it's not just. So it's to say, it's not just that, is it? If you think about every rugby town, Gloucester, Northampton, Bath, the revenue that's generated on match day for mum and pop pub across the road and the restaurant down there, it's not just the rugby clubs that are suffering and that sort of thing. It's the economy nationwide sort of thing.
Well, they're talking about this being the worst recession for 300 years. I mean, this is how the hell do you get your head around? We've been through 2 world wars in the last century, and what we're going through now is considered to be, a sort of a huge downturn even on those days. I mean, it's very, very sad. And the reason that rugby gets a lot of pickup is because it's an escape for so many of us. It's a passion point. It's what, floats our Saturday afternoons. And we haven't got that to turn to as an escape. And in fact, what we're seeing is, the whole thing come under serious attack. And when your passion points and your hobbies and your escapes get attacked, that everyone feels that a little bit more, I think. But yeah, I mean, listen, I've got absolutely no answers for you. I think there are so many valid questions, but honestly, it's just a case of wait and see. There are inevitably going to be some casualties. I mean, I read an article on Nick Abendanen today, who's
I saw that earlier as well.
One of the superstars of the top 14. Just all conversations have dried up. He had 2 hot leads in Pro D2. He had conversations going on back here with the Premiership. He's 33 years old. Still got exactly what it takes at that level.
Yeah.
Conversations going. Carl Ferns is another guy. I mean, there are going to be some guys who have really, really sad and uncomfortable outcomes from all of this.
No, definitely. And
scary times.
Yeah, we're going to see it. It's going to be months, years. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be years on the line before we can get back to normality. Not just the country, not just for rugby, but
you made an interesting point there about the championship, and I think this does accelerate. Ring fencing. I think, the RFU had already moved to, I think it was back in January or whatever it was, they'd halved the funding and then they're going to put a bit more money back in. But the conversation the decision had already been made, essentially.
Yeah.
100%.
Premiership and Championship to be separated. I mean, that's an absolute inevitability now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, actually, funnily enough, whether what we might be looking at here is, and it's interesting, you look at the CVC money, which is obviously, there've been some big conversations going on, but if there is a smouldering mess at the end of this in 6-12 months time, whatever it's going to be, there's either I think there's either the opportunity for a CVC plus possibly a broadcaster to come together, pop a pound on the table and say, we will take all of this and we will build it from the ground up again. I think somebody will come in with money and say, this is potentially the way forward. The other potential thing which we were mulling over the other day is whether somebody, I don't know if you remember the Kerry Packer attempt back in 1995 to basically own rugby in the Southern Hemisphere, but he went after the players and he thought signed up the top 25 players in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and was going to create this incredible league. And then at the last minute there was a bit of a volte face and they went back to their unions. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was a big money man who comes in, or an organisation who buys up the top 100 players in the world puts them on £1 million each, and says, right, we'll build a competition around you.
Yeah, there was talk, I think there was rumours in the past about the championship looking at things like similar aspects like the Pro 14, etc., and kind of splitting off away from the RFU to basically say, you ring fence, well, screw you.
Yeah. I just, to be honest with you, that feels like the conversation's just moved on so far now. I mean, I think there are so many different factions, and there are so many big personalities, and there's so many friction points in rugby right now, that unless this is the opportunity to get everybody aligned on the same page, with a global calendar that works, and with players playing less but higher intensity games, then ultimately the game is just dragging itself off a cliff. You know, there are. It is not interesting enough as a product, and that will pain the four of us to hear it. But there aren't enough super fans out there for this to be sustainable and in its current form. The game works. Big events sell, but this needs to be a blank sheet of paper. And right, this is our opportunity to, out of the ashes of what was, build something that works and is sustainable going forwards, and becomes, challenges the Premier League football for backpage space, etc.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're not there.
No. Yeah, agreed. And I think it's going to be the next 12, 18 months is going to be an interesting one, I think.
Sure, that is an understatement. But yeah.
Yeah. So moving away from rugby slightly, obviously you set up something rather new, a bit different in influence rugby.
Yep.
Obviously, talk about that, how that all came about, what's it about, obviously, who obviously is driving that with you.
Yeah, so it's a good question, really. So I've always had an interest in business. Sort of had about trying to think, but probably five or six little companies over the last 15 years. Some I've got to a point where I've sold them for not much more than pocket money. More than half went bust, or we just wrapped up. But I've always enjoyed tinkering. I've always enjoyed business. I quite like the element of networking, etc. And I sort of got into it more because I was spending so much time on the golf course and not getting any better that I thought there had to be a sort of a slightly higher purpose to my life than just practicing my backswing. Anyway, so the influence room came about from an actual learning. It came about from the world that I inhabited, which was broadcasting and that kind of thing. And it actually came about because I was given a box with 500 quid's worth of Star Wars merchandise in it. Okay. So there were books, games, DVDs, TV controls, all that kind of thing. And they wanted me to tweet. The Star Wars wanted me to tweet about the fact that they were showing the Star Wars omnibus back to back on a Saturday. So it's a really cool product that they spent time, money, and effort putting together. It's very clear what they wanted, which was me to say to my Twitter followers, make sure you watch Star Wars at the weekend. And yet I had absolutely no interest in Star Wars whatsoever. I literally haven't seen it since I was 7. I put out some fairly tepid social media content at the best of times, but I did send the tweet for them, and it got a whopping 12 likes. At which point I was like, what an utter waste of my time. My audience were like, well, the hell are you telling us to watch Star Wars? And obviously Star Wars were like, well, that doesn't really work. The whole point of the story is that there are too many brands out there running around and either throwing product at people who don't really want it. And again, the Star Wars one is a microcosm. I've been gifted lots of clothes by brands who want me to wear them on telly, and I've been given invitations to events I've got absolutely no interest in coming to. And the more I began to research sort of inefficiency in the market, either there are brands hoiking loads of product campaigns, experiences to people who don't want it, or they're paying them an extortionate amount of money to talk about it. We have built a site whereby essentially instead of Star Wars running around headlessly, what they do is they put their boxes on a site and they say, who loves Star Wars? Yeah. And they are approached by pre-vetted people of influence who are actors, actresses, models, musicians, tastemakers, chefs, explorers, lots of social media influencers, sportsmen and women. And those people can say, I bloody love Star Wars. Please send me that box. I'll create some really lovely content for you, and I'll give a bit of a kicker to the fact that you've got this show on Saturday. Because for me, if that had been a Butch Cassidy and the Sundance or a Godfather box, I'd have absolutely loved it because those are the films I enjoy.
What would they send in the Godfather box though? Like a horse's head? Or...
I would have loved a horse's head in a box. Exactly. Stuck it in the wife's side of the bed, and that would have been me in the spare room for a year. But the point is that we've built a site which is much more about mutually beneficial partnerships. It's about brands finding out who need, love, and want them, And it's about influential people. Instead of receiving junk they don't want, they're able to self-select the brands they do. So if they want to go on a holiday, or they want a free Deliveroo, or they want to go to the cinema, they can use us to find brands that they genuinely are interested in and say, guys, I'd love to partner up. Here's how I'll create the content for you. Let me know if that's interesting. So there's no money changing hands. It's just a really cool sort of beneficial
peer-to-peer sort of thing.
Exactly, peer-to-peer, word-of-mouth recommendation. And we do really interesting collaborations. Obviously, everyone's talking about an influencer nowadays as someone who's on social media and gets paid to post content. But we do loads of stuff with people who make personal appearances. We've got a very famous musician with us, and she did a really cool deal with Range Rover, where she got a car for a year, and she went to a few of their events. She loved the brand. That was the brand that she really, really, wanted to work with. They said, brilliant, we'll sort you out with a car, but we'd love to have you at Goodwood. We'd love to host you at a couple of our events because you had Stardust and Glamour. So it's very discreet. It's quite a sort of secret little community, but we're having a lot of fun with it, and it sort of feels more relevant than it's ever been now. Advocacy, I think, is where every brand is heading. They need to be brave enough to put themselves in the hand of the people who say, love what you're about, and trust them to tell an organic, authentic story that resonates with their audience authentically.
Yeah, it ties back in when you were talking about getting into broadcasting, and it was easy enough to do it because you absolutely love the sport. And kind of the similar aspect with the influence room, where they absolutely love what you're trying to do, or what you're trying to sell, or what you're trying to give. It makes it
easy. It's easy to sell.
It's not your job.
Yeah, and even more than that, I think if you look you look at businesses that are booming at the moment. Certainly were booming before the last quarter. But we are living in a huge sort of sharing society now. Airbnb is a sharing platform. Amazon is a shop sharing site. Deliveroo is a food sharing service. And we have an ambition to be a sort of global trading platform where people share their influence. And actually, that's for good purposes as well as for contra opportunities. So we run charitable causes and campaigns through the site, and people will support them because they genuinely believe in them and because they want to tell their audience about the charities and the causes that touch them and that they want to back. So, we talk about influential people obviously having a commercial element to what they do. But if you're interesting and you're influential, you should have the contra element, which is the stuff you want to do because you want to do it, and you should support charities and causes because that is the right thing to do. If you have an audience who are engaged in what you talk about, you should be letting them know about the things that deserve the attention. At the moment, that is everybody talking about how much they love the NHS, and rightly so.
Exactly. No, 100%. And obviously, circling on the whole charity side, obviously we alluded to you before we started recording. So we're really advocate and giving a big drive to a charity called Marshalling Men's Minds, which is huge for men's mental health. But me personally, it's all about mental health for everybody. Obviously, given the COVID-19 we've got at the moment, what advice, tips, and things you've got for people to keep their mind kind of ticking over and keeping them in the right frame of mind? Or if someone is starting to struggle, what kind of things would you advise them?
So that is a very good question. And there are people who are far more qualified than I am to sort of tell you how to make the most of it, kind of thing. From a personal experience, I consider myself fortunate. Is that the right way to say it? I don't know. Up until about sort of 2 or 3 years ago, I'd had a very good run of it, is the truth. And then I had a sort of a series of setbacks, fairly fundamental setbacks. So I had I was on a very good thing at Sky. They lost every single right they had going, and I was a contractor. And at the end of my contract, they said, "Thanks very much, goodbye." And there was a bit more to it than that, but I sort of thought I was going to be kept on and be doing various other things. And I went into a meeting expecting to be given a new contract and was told, "Thanks a lot, that's it." And I will be straight up with you and say that that absolutely clean bowled me. I was not expecting it. Interestingly, I also hugely associated myself with Sky. I still do bits of work with them now. And if scenarios come back around and change again, then I'm hopefully on very good terms with good people there, and there might be a conversation to pick up. But I had a huge part of my identity was linked to Sky, so much so that my Twitter handle was @Sky Sports Alex P or something like that. anyway, so the reason I mention that is that I was always aware that the media was a very unstable landscape, and hence my love of business and the the interest in getting something going. And I'd built the influence room to a point where, I was almost stepping from one lily pad to the other, and I was patting myself on the back, saying, right, you've lost that, but you've still got this. And within a month, the influence room was absolutely nosediving into oblivion, and I'd suddenly gone from being on, a fairly good run of it, and a job that took me away and took me to some very glamorous places. I'd literally just finished covering the Lions tour in New Zealand, and I'd gone from the highs of that third test and a tech business that was scaling very quickly to suddenly losing my stability of my income from broadcasting and a business I put a huge amount of hard work into, really wobbling on all four wheels. And the reason I mention that is I ended up in a fairly challenging situation, I suppose. It's not something I've ever really spoken about in great detail before. But what I learned from it, I think, is several things. One of which, and it goes back to that fundamental belief that actually none of this really matters. I'd put a huge amount of pressure on myself to have a certain expectation and a certain lifestyle and that kind of thing. And I just ended up stripping out all the crap from my life I didn't need. And I genuinely mean that. I cancelled all subscriptions. I just got rid of everything. What else did I learn? I learned that you are very much your own person, and I'd been terrified of no longer being Sky Sports Alex P. And actually, what I realised was that I had a currency on my own, which I'd never really recognised before. And I've been very lucky. House of Rugby has been more fun, more enjoyable, and better for me as a broadcaster than anything I'd ever done at Sky. I also got given some very good advice by, and I hope it comes across the right way. I spoke to a few people. There was a friend of mine who said it's very hard to starve, and there are obviously people in far less fortunate positions than ourselves. And I don't mean it to be a flippant comment, but essentially, most of us are lucky enough to have a support network around us who will scoop us up in our times of need. And I think, I've been very, very lucky. I've got an amazing wife. I've got two parents who were very robust with me. And I sort of got to a point where I'd sort of really enjoyed getting rid of all of my life and rediscovering my identity, and realizing actually that I think simplicity is a very, very good way to be. I talk a lot about being in the middle lane to middle age, not going too fast and not going too slow, and actually I'm really, really comfortable there. I think we can all want for far too much. I think there are a lot of people out there who spend a lot of time worrying about what they don't have rather than concentrating on what they do. And fundamentally, I'm lucky to have a roof over my head. I'm lucky to have a podcast that I love doing, a tech business I'm really proud of, a wife that is amazing, and two kids who, fundamentally, we're talking about the NHS. My dear darling daughter was very, very premature when she was born, and I owe her entire life to the NHS. I mean, I literally can put it no other way. Yeah. So I'm incredibly fortunate, but it's taken a seismic shift to my circumstance and to my self expectations to let me realise that, and I'm happier now with almost less than I've ever had than I was when I thought I was on a trajectory where it was all coming thick and fast. So that doesn't really answer your question, but it's what I've learned is that fundamentally we deal with a lot of crap and strip it out, concentrate on the things that matter and the people who you care about, and don't really worry too much about the incidentals. It's why on social media I just find it extraordinary that people spend so much time criticizing, critiquing, and messaging people things that they don't like.
Yeah, exactly. It's madness. It's like you've got your own rights.
It's when people critique, a show that we do, and they say, "I've watched that from front to back, and I've absolutely hated every minute." It's the equivalent of saying, "I've got my hand in a fire and it's burning." Well, take your hand out of the fire, go and do something else. It's like stop complaining about the fire. It's I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
It's like ordering a meal at a restaurant, eating all of it, and then going, "Oh, that was awful. I don't want, take that back. I want a new one, please." Just ridiculous.
Life is very short. Concentrate on the things that matter, the people that matter, and the things that you enjoy doing. Stop wasting your time on things that just have no bearing or relevance to who you are. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, it's a bit long.
100%, no, 100% does. I know you said that you're not a professional, etc. That to us, it's not the be all and end all. To us, personal experiences help others, and that's what it's about. We do ask the same question to all of our guests, because you could go to a doctor and they'll say this is a rigid thing you've got to do. It doesn't work for everyone. So the different scenarios that everyone comes up with, the way that you've dealt with things, the way that some of our other get, that all helps, and hopefully the message will get out there, and someone will hear it and go, yeah, I need to strip back. And simplistic life is 100% correct. More people think wealth is money, cars, house, etc., when realistically it's not. It's family, making sure you've got roof over their head, dinner on the table. That's fundamentals, and if you can get that in your mindset, everything else is a bonus.
Do you know one thing I did do, funny enough? I was just going to say, one thing I did do, which actually did help a lot, was every day I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for, or 3 things I'd enjoyed. And it's a really interesting reference point looking back at it now. But I would suggest that if people are thinking, I'm hating all of this, the sun's shining, the flowers in the garden, and FaceTime with your nan or whatever it is actually, these are things, they are little pleasures. And and I'm sure you guys are the same, I was guilty of running at 110 miles an hour and never really stopping to focus on the things that matter. We are living, as it touched on it, really, we're living in the midst of an absolute crisis, and yet I've never spent as much time around the kitchen table with my family, and
how much more wealthy are you?
Something really enjoying.
Yeah, it's much more wealth. And I think, to me personally, one of the things that I found or I learned, I think I was listening to an old Navy, American Navy commander or wherever he was. And the first thing he said was, to start my day, to make sure that I was in the right frame of mind, I'd make my bed. So I could then have the worst day in the world, nothing else would matter, because I'd get back, get to my room, and know I've achieved one thing today, and that's what I've made my bed.
Dean Windass, a big advocate of that as well. I'm a Hull City fan for my sins, although JK will slate to that.
Name me 2 other Hull City players.
Sorry, you're breaking up, Dom. You're breaking up, mate. Tell me.
Are we talking about the time?
Hull City, very fashionable. I can understand.
Are we talking about the time in Swansea where Hull City were walking down the promenade and you would not go get a picture with them, even though they stopped? Do we want to talk about that?
The long story short was, we were playing rugby sevens in Swansea. I said to Dom, it's only touch. I might slope off early and watch the Swansea Hull City game. And he was slating me for that. He said he's going to rip me for it, bring it up in kangaroo court and all that sort of thing. So I declined, because we had too few players as well. I didn't go. And lo and behold, they actually came to watch us play. They were walking along the promenade. And JK, bearing in mind, I said, oh, yeah, I support Hull because my dad's from Hull and all this sort of thing. And JK went, he's a Hull fan like that, right? The manager came over to shake my hand. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know absolutely anyone. I mean, I'm rugby through.
Absolutely starstruck, weren't you?
Under the bus.
Faux fan, very much a faux fan. Why Hull City if you're a faux fan? I don't know, but
I still brought up a kangaroo court that evening. Oh no,
that was the night before. That was the issue.
Oh, it was. One you nearly didn't make it out. Sorry.
Going back to the commentary side of things and that sort of thing. What is your outstanding, your most favourite memory based around rugby from your career?
One I've broadcasted, or one I've just watched as a fan.
Well, either really, whichever.
I'd say broadcasted.
Yeah.
Broadcasted. I will be honest with you. I have a massive sweet spot for the Lions. They are. I think they're the most. I think they're the most special thing in sport. And I think they should be treasured at all costs.
It's a pinnacle of a place.
It's sad. Yeah. It saddens me enormously that they're chipping away. And I think it devalues the Lions. I think it makes the job harder for them. And I think it removes, there's so little romance and nostalgia and history in sport nowadays. It's so commercialized and fast and bright lights. And the Lions is one of those last true sort of bastions of history. So I would, that day at the Gabba, I would say is pretty hard to beat. I mean, it was just, as a massive rugby fan and a wide-eyed, student, it was just an extraordinary sensation to be there. From a broadcasting perspective, that second test in Wellington in 2017 was pretty special. Yeah. that was a remarkable day. And actually, funny enough, that was all the more remarkable because, and I don't know if you remember this, but it sort of it crept out afterwards. We had Surya McGeechan as our guest, and he's a ledge. He's just an absolute ledge. He's the most wonderful guy. And we'd gone down to the ground, and I remember very clearly walking down to the ground. I walked down with our commentator Miles Harrison from the hotel. It's a 45-minute walk. And we were just like, there's absolutely not a hope in hell. You know, this is, you know, by 8 o'clock tonight, the Lions tour is done. And, you know, it felt pretty gloomy, to be honest with you. And we got to the ground and we're having sort of pre-broadcast meal. And poor old Geach fell very, very ill, actually. So much so he was rushed to hospital in an ambulance. And it didn't look very good at all. And as a result of that, what we were expecting to be we'd have an hour and a half to get ready and rehearse, etc., just evaporated. Like no one quite knew what to do. We weren't sure, to be honest with you, what the story was going to be. We were actually looking at abandoning what was going to be an hour's build-up and just coming straight on air to kick off. And there would probably been an announcement of sorts. And it was the biggest broadcast I would have ever done. You know, second Lions test in New Zealand, I think is absolutely incredible. Anyway, eventually, about 5 minutes before we were due to be on air, and having not looked at a script or written a word or had not had a single rehearsal, the call came through that Geach was sitting up in bed and the show must go on. And so we literally rolled cameras and went live on air in front of everybody at home back having their eggs and bacon without a minute of getting ready for it. And the whole crew just ran on adrenaline. It was absolutely extraordinary. And it turned out to be a really amazing broadcast. And that didn't often happen, but we sort of hit it out of the middle of the bat. And then the game itself just unfolded. There was the most, every so often we had it, you get it, there was just something in the air on game day. And England, New Zealand 2012 at Twickenham was another day where you just arrived and you thought there is something a little bit different in the air today. And you can feel it. And that second test in Wellington was unbelievable. Special days. Club games, Bath winning the European Cup as a fan it's hard to beat. And the Munster Wasps semi-final at Lansdowne Road in 2003 was not only an amazing day, but one hell of a night out afterwards. So
imagine.
Yeah, some special days. I've been very, very lucky, and I could bore you senseless with hours of great days, but those are probably the four I'd pick.
Fair enough. And in terms of, I probably imagine what you're going to pick. Your most cringeful moment. Presenting
I wonder.
Is there another, or is it?
Well, that's a rhetorical question, isn't it? So that was Adam's play. It was amazing, actually, and funny enough, it almost refers a little bit back to the question you were asking earlier. I mean, it was sort of the day that I really relaxed on air because I came home and just like, shit happens. We all have bad days, we all have shockers at work. Just we don't tend to do it in front of 500,000 people. And recorded. and live and recorded.
At least you gave the nation a laugh.
And I'm very comfortable in that. Funny enough, so that would, it is what it is. I'm fairly unfussed or flustered by it. I actually fell off a stage in Dublin live on air a couple of years ago as well. That didn't go terribly well, but that's sort of that was a bit more comical. Genuinely, the funny thing now though is, and I'd sort of take you back to being terrified of doing that two-way cross back in 2005. I absolutely love it when it goes wrong now. I relish the days when the whole bloody thing falls apart, because that as a broadcast is the bit where you earn your money, you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You just have to go with what's happening. It's unscripted. It's those are the fun bits. I love it when it goes tits up now.
And as long as the producer's laughing, then you're all right.
Well, normally a lot of the talkback issues we used to have at Sky, I could never hear the producer anyway, so I was trying to keep up with where I was going. But a good producer is absolutely key to any good broadcast. They're the silent eyes.
Exactly. So obviously you're on our podcast today. You've got your own with Joe of House of Rugby.
Yep.
How did that all come about? That's what I want to know. How did that happen? Was it kind of you kind of talking about it? Was it you and then Has kind of just followed?
Honestly, it was. I mean, but the truth of it is, I had a very good agent at the time, actually. Or he still does bits and bobs with me, and he literally just threw me their name and said, "These guys are looking to do something in rugby. Do you want to chat?" And I met a guy called Evan Fanning, who's the head of content at Joe, and we had a cup of coffee, and he said, "We want to do something in rugby. What do you think?" And I've got, my job on air is to ask questions and to I always like to describe myself as the referee. The less you notice me, the better the show, and I'm very, very comfortable with that. It's all about making. I have a firm belief that it's all about making superstars look like superstars. But I've got some quite firm beliefs on what makes good content and what makes engaging, interesting subject matter. And I outlined an idea for a plan, and he said, "Who would you get?" And the two people I said would be really worthwhile getting a Haskell, because he will take you places that no one else will. He will say things that no other modern player will do.
100%.
And Tins, because he has got connections and a backstory and a passion for the game. Haskell's got no interest in the game whatsoever. But amazing energy and a lot of fun. And Tins has got incredible connections for obvious reasons, and actually genuinely loves the game as well. He is a really sharp analyst of the game, and you can see why he was involved coaching at Gloucester. I think it's really sad that people like him and probably Greenwood as well, actually, who are real. I mean, Greenwood was just an extraordinary visionary, but they don't roll up this. I mean, Green's actually coaches at Maidenhead quite a lot, and I think is loves it at that level. But I thought, funnily enough, when Scott Robertson was in the frame for the Quins job, that Will might get involved there. And I know he's been into Coach England with Eddie Jones and stuff like that. I think there's bits of him that dips his toe in, and then he's like, he makes far too much money on the corporate circuit. Why would you bother the hassle? So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. But so that was the question. And then they went and spoke to Hask and said, "Do you want to do it?" And he was like, "Yeah, that sounds quite fun." He was pretty unconvinced at the start, and Lord just sort of wandered in, said how we were doing, we got into it, and it's been really fun actually, just developing it. It's it is a rugby show that doesn't really have that much interest or talk about very much rugby, but we do like to talk about characters. And we love love unlocking interesting people. That's the key to it.
Who's been your favourite one so far then?
I
know mine, but I'd like to get yours.
What's that?
I said I know what mine would be, but obviously it'd be great to know yours first.
Ben Ryan.
Yeah.
We actually had an hour and a half with Matt Hampson last night as well, and that is a proper roller coaster. And I really, really enjoyed the one last night because Matt's story, and everyone in rugby will know. I mentioned it last night. I was actually there the day it happened. It was just something that will live with you forever, kind of thing. Yeah. I remember seeing the coaches' faces at the time. It's just shocking. But what was really fun about last night, Matt's story, and he's told it unbelievably well over a number of years now. He's written an incredible book, Engage, and he has just. I've never met a man who has turned such a seismic shift in one's fortunes into such a positive force for good. But what was really lovely about last night is that we were chatting to Matt, and it was just chat, and that was something I'd not really heard from him before in a sort of public space, with talking about all sorts of fucking weird stories. But it was really nice just to chat with him as a person rather than interview him about his story. If you know what I mean? So I think that one had great power. I love Marla. I will always love Marla.
There's my favourite one. I bet that was more like a referee between them two.
Yeah, I mean, he's a unique character, and I think rugby needs to be very, very careful. I think he behaved like a prat in that England-Wales game, and he'll hold his hands up and say it. But he's to the social media, he's talking about retirement. It's just
again,
we are in a world now where you are pigeonholing and just limiting characters. People aren't interested. Characters are what
exactly. People want characters, and arguably that's what the game needs moving forward.
Yeah. But why can we not say, Joe, you're a prat, don't do that again, let's all move on? Why does it have to be a week-long investigation and a 3-month ban and a £20,000 fine? And just
the mad one for me is that weekend there was, I think, one of the Scottish props got an absolute hit to the head. someone actually right hooked him.
That's a cheap shot, wasn't it?
And gets 3 weeks for it. Marler,
yeah, I mean,
10. It's absolutely outrageous.
you know, I can understand that you can't get things wrong because
No.
of.
Obviously, he should have been punished, and yes, I agree with that.
But you know, let's do it with just a modicum of I
The
don't know.
rugby players at the end of the day.
I
We're all
don't
rugby.
Yeah, I know. I'm just sad that I'm sad for him because I know the guy and I know he was being a dick. He wasn't being. There was just nothing more to it than a man being a prat.
Yeah, arguably that's just probably a lot worse things happen at your grassroots rugby club on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Perhaps that is why they throw the book at him because 9 million people watch that and they don't want every rugby club.
Well, you've found out real of Exeter and their celebration with each other is
exactly.
exactly the same thing. Are they now going to go to them and say, can't do that?
Well, I don't know. We're on dangerous ground. This probably should come out, I suppose. But it's only an opinion. Don't shoot me very
exactly. No, everything's an opinion. But no.
Perfect.
I'm surprised actually because we've not had scenario Neil yet.
Yeah, you got.
I was just being polite and waiting. There's the scenarios approaching.
Go on, Neil.
I need to get the edge of my seat. Scenario, Neil. Go on.
Yeah, this was going to get a bit weird, so bear with me. Right. So.
Oh God.
You've never met Hask. You've never met Tins before, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, in theory, they are the father of your lovely wife. You've not been married yet. You have to ask permission to marry. Who are you more scared of asking for the hand of their daughter?
Can I just add, you have excelled yourself, Neil.
That's actually an impressive one.
That is, yeah.
Some of us are taking isolation better than others.
Solly does all day.
Asking for the hand of their daughter in marriage. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who would you be more scared of? And this is, you've never met him before. This is, you're meeting him as the father of your girlfriend / fiance.
Honestly, Hask. It would be Hask. Tins is a lovely guy with a pretty relaxed attitude to life, and I think he'd sort of welcome with a bear hug. Hask is an angry man who hates everybody who he doesn't know. He's an enormous unit. An MMA fighter. I reckon Tin's daughter comes with a bigger dowry as well, so I'd definitely go with Tin's. The one I'd be more interested in proposing to. Hask. Hask is an angry man, and therefore I think he'd be a worse offer to get involved in.
Perfect. Well,
it's a repeat scenario. We've been asking all our guests. I say we've been asking all our guests. So you're on lockdown for 2 weeks solid. You cannot leave the house full stop for your hour a day. You're having your food brought to you. From your experiences in rugby, people you've met, people you've worked with, who would be the absolute nightmare to be in that house with for 2 weeks?
Marla.
Not even waiting in there.
Just Marla. I mean,
I have might be a laugh.
You've not seen that show. I mean, I had to have counselling off the back of it.
That's
we have a lot of fun actually. I'm genuinely very, very fond of him. He's and actually funny enough, he is a seriously good man as well. So I had a scenario last year where very sadly I had a very dear my best mate's son, who was my godson, was not very well unfortunately, and has sadly succumbed to brain cancer. But I said to Joe that I'm trying to raise some money. Will you do will you help me out and come and do a show with me? And we did a show in London in this venue. We had 400 people in. It was basically a reprise of the House of Rugby we've done. And I said that there's a fee for you. He said, mate, don't be ridiculous. Pop it straight in the pot for the good cause. And there are not many guys out there in this day and age who would come up from Brighton on a Wednesday night and spend 3 hours of his time chatting rubbish, sign autographs, pose with all the fans, etc., and then say, mate, just give me 20 quid for petrol, and that's me good. He is a genuinely good man. But I would struggle with him in a house of isolation for 2 years. The other one, funny enough, would have been Jono. I was absolutely terrified of interviewing Martin Johnson when I started out, age 23, 24. It was really nightmare stuff. And then funny enough, we ended up doing quite a bit of stuff together for Standard Life, I think it was, ahead of the 2017 Lions tour. What a remarkable man. I mean, just really, you don't want to get on the wrong side of him, but when you sort of get into it a bit, just fascinating bloke. Really, really, really interesting guy. So that, funny enough, that was a nice, from a personal point of view, it was a nice little win to move from being terrified of a bloke to actually, having a chance to have a sandwich with him. He's an interesting guy. And again, another bloke who, it would be so nice to see him back in the game beyond the commentary box. I mean, he is England's greatest ever, and it obviously went very badly when he had his hand on the tiller, but he's just, there's so much that he could and should be giving to the game. But I'm not sure we'll see that again, sadly.
Yeah. So just before we obviously wrap it up, last night we had an interesting one, obviously talking about Hask, and you mentioned slightly you went into the side of things. We're hoping that you could pass on a cheeky message, which will be going live in the coming couple of weeks. So we had Mr. Bracken, Pete Bracken, on last night. Obviously, Hask has had a few call-outs, I'd say.
Few. He'll fight a day for the rest of his life.
Not many from the say rugby world, but obviously Pete Bracken has called him out. Obviously Pete's been in the old octagon before. What's the chances of you hopefully helping promote that one?
Get it sorted for charity.
Exactly.
I can tell you now, and I mean, you say he hasn't been called out by any rugby players. He's had Andy Powell, he's had Neil Best.
Wow.
He's had some big units offer him a tickle up. I can pass on the message. I tell you now, Hask will have absolutely no interest at all in fighting Pete Bracken. They know each other from West days. Hask has called Pete out a few times on the show for various things.
This must be the reason why Pete's brought it up.
Yeah, funny enough, and he would be entirely with his own rights to do that. Hask will call himself a finely tuned ultimate fighting machine, and will have no interest in fighting Pete Bracken. But he can message him and he can give it a good shot. I will stay well out of it. I don't want anything to do with Hask and his fighting other than front row seats on fight night.
To be fair, if that happened at the Rico, I would more than happily buy a ticket to that.
Do you know something? Genuinely, I think he might surprise a few people when it happens.
I think so. I think he's going to.
I think there is. He's taking it very, very seriously, and I think he wouldn't be doing it were he not.
If he wasn't in it to win it.
Yeah.
This is no Flintoff kind of.
Give it a go.
I think Hask and Flintoff have got beef as well. They might well have another fight. This isn't a sort of PR stunt, and I'm going to wear, Paddy Power trunks, and then that'll be it. He's in proper prime condition. He says he's physically better now than he was when he was playing because he's not getting
whole different training. And obviously I've done amateur ultra white collar, and it's the same level. However, going from playing 80 minutes of rugby, to going and doing a few rounds in boxing, I tell you what, first round gassed, gone. I'm like, this is a whole new level. So the level he's gone up to, I can only imagine the training he's doing to get himself in shape. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think he'll generate some interesting headlines when it comes along, but I would not put a lot of money on him fighting Pete Bracken. It's just out of respect.
But yeah, sorry, Pete, we tried, but
we got asked to
respect to the big man. You never know what he'll say. I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope.
No, it's fine. But no, Alex, it's been an absolute privilege having you on.
Thanks, chaps. It's been a lot of fun. Been very cathartic. It's been a good session.
Yeah, it's flowed, thankfully.
Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we did. It's good. It's good to have you on.
Been a really good luck. Thank you, chaps. Best of luck with all your endeavours, and we'll keep in touch and look forward to seeing how you guys fare.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Cheers.